How has porn influenced your sex lives? That's a good short question.
It's usually on while I'm having sex. That's about all I can say about it, really.
But has it changed about the expectations of the type of bloke that you find attractive or that you are drawn to?
No, because reality isn't like that. I mean, we can all have fantasies about going to bed with a porn star and whatnot, but reality says that that is not what general population of people are like.
Mm.
You know, we've all got wobbly bits, we've all got saggy baggy bits, especially as you get a bit older. The reality of life is such that you ain't going to get what you get in a porn movie. It's purely there for escapism.
I think it was really interesting what a comment I read recently which was that you either look at porn or you have a sex life.
Yeah.
You don't have both.
Yes.
And I think the reason
What was
behind I can't remember, but I think it's a really good point, because if you do watch a lot of porn, then you build up in your mind such a picture of what should actually
that it makes the reality impossible to match.
Exactly, yeah. And you're constantly being let down, and you can't perform, or you find it disappointing, and
unless you find that one person, and then it doesn't matter what porn you're putting on. You'll still
but that's just looking at sex as purely as just a sex act, and there's clearly there's emotions involved that you can't get from watching porn. I mean, in the way that when you have sex with someone, it's not. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's not always just about the act, is it? And you can't get that from porn. You can't get that connection with the person. I don't think one.
It's very easy to fall into the trap of falling to the point where you rely on porn. And I think it's probably a good idea to turn the porn off in the bedroom every now and again, just so that you actually prove to yourself that it is your partner that turns you on and not just the porn.
But if you're in a relationship.
Yes. Well, that helps.
I think one does displace the other. I think is perhaps putting it more cleverly.
But yours personally, has it affected you?
Well, I think so. Yes. So I mean, if I had a choice between getting on the bus, going to the sauna with a view to having sex and finding sex, or just sitting at home, turning on the computer and not having to go anywhere and knowing for sure that
the computer wins every time.
The computer wins every time.
Yes,
exactly. And that
has improved your sex life.
No, it's displaced. It's displaced it really, because it's not nearly as satisfactory, but it's so much easier. And
rather than going out and getting physical contact.
Yeah.
Which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, and that can't be.
I'm just listening.
And I don't think that can be good, really. I think because it's a substitute. It's a sort of ersatz sex life, really.
Ersatz.
Oh, it's an artificially produced. It's an artificiality.
Substitution.
It's a substitution. Yeah.
Yes. For what? Sorry, and I'm in no way trying to sort of belittle what your sex lives are and what sexual gratification you get, because what pleases you, and that's great. But what is it that you said a sauna, having sex in a sauna?
Yes.
So what is it about having sex in a sauna? I assume a relatively anonymous sex in a sauna is so much greater than watching porn. Because you're saying,
physical contact.
It's physical contact, yes, and it's a relationship with another human being. It's physical contact. You're pleasing him, he's pleasing you. It's actually. It may not be the classic, wonderful, gone with the wind sort of sex in a loving relationship, as in Hollywood, but it's still a form of quite satisfying sex. And I know people may say it's morally wrong, but I don't agree with that in any way. I think it's quite, and it's one of the joys of being gay that you can go off on a sauna. And I'm sure there are 10 million straight men out there who give their right arm to be able to go off to a sauna and have sex with loads of women.
That's why they hate us.
A lot of it's jealousy, that's right, yeah. You're right, yes.
A lot of it's jealousy because of what they perceive us to be doing rather than what we are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, either or, I think.
Yes.
Still jealousy.
Yeah. So do you think that porn has affected your life or people that you know?
I don't want to speak for other people, but I know.
It has a place.
It has a place. And I think sometimes I'm happy it's there as... not as an alternative, but as the only option. But for some people, it is the only option. Yeah. So better to have that than nothing at all.
On porn, though, is
you
the
could buy
fact
it. You could buy a prostitute. That's an option.
I wouldn't want to force, although is porn the same thing, to force, I don't know those, but I always feel a bit uncomfortable. I don't know the person who's offering sex for money, I don't know what their circumstances are, and I would hate to feel that you were doing it where they had no choice. Whether they needed the money for whatever reason or they were addicted to drugs. So they needed the money, and therefore
people do all sorts of jobs because they have
absolutely fine.
We're all prostitutes.
Well, to a less degree.
We are. You sell your body and time.
I don't know what I don't know their circumstances. I've always felt a bit uncomfortable because a lot of prostitutes are prostitutes for reasons often beyond their control, and I wouldn't want to feel that I was
fueling and supporting it.
I was I'd feel like I'm perhaps potentially exploiting them, so I would feel uncomfortable about doing that.
But there are but I totally understand what you're saying. But there are people where they have to do jobs where they're prostituting themselves.
Exactly, yeah, and you're
not necessarily for sex, but just in general.
Yeah, it's the capitalist system, isn't it?
Yeah, you're exploiting people by shopping at Tesco's because they're employing somebody on the till at £6 an hour for some wretched job.
And you'd equate the two. You'd say somebody like at Tesco's is being forced to prostitute themselves in the same way as somebody who has to sell their body for sex. You put those on an equal.
Well, I wouldn't include the word forced, but if you take the word forced out,
you're using prostitute.
Absolutely, no distinction at all. I really don't. I think it's and if you have a choice, if I had a choice between working on a till at Tesco at £6 an hour or being paid £60 an hour to have somebody come round and have sex with me, or whatever it is now, I would choose the latter. And if somebody made that choice, good luck to them. Good.
Okay.
I mean, if he was a druggie, and he's, that was obvious, and then that would raise a lot of other questions.
But we don't know that.
At the end of the day, there is always an alternative to having sex for money.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to go down the prostitution route. There's always another option. So if you do go down that route, then there must be a certain, I'm not saying that they want to go down that route, but there must be a certain amount of, okay, I'm okay with this, to be doing it in the first place. I mean, I used to know a rent boy, wasn't anything to do with me, it was just somebody that I knew, but he really enjoyed sex, he enjoyed having a lot of sex, so he went on the game, because he got the benefit of being paid for doing what he enjoyed doing. Now, I mean, how many people do you know that can do a job that they really enjoy and get paid for doing it?
Do you not think there's a price to pay though? There is a price he has to pay for that. An emotional price that he's going to have to pay for that.
There's always an emotional price, whatever you do, whether it's working in a supermarket, walking dogs, or selling your body for sexual pleasure for other people. I think we are all sort of prostitutes, really, because we have to, unless you're independently wealthy or a banker, you have to go to work and sometimes get up early on Monday morning and do things you don't particularly want to do because you've got your rent to pay and food to put in your stomach. And if you didn't go, then you would starve.
At the end of the day, that is prostitution.
Yeah,
it is.
It's just that you're getting something different in return.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
You're exchanging your time and effort for financial reward, which is the same thing.
Yeah, and as a society, we love to demonise people, who are prostitutes and say, oh, they're all druggies, or they're going to be desperate, they're going to have awful psychological problems. It's not the case at all. It may be for some of them, but it's not necessary.
That's my point. I think that's my point, Geoff, is that there are people doing all those jobs that have psychological problems, and actually families are breaking up and are on alcohol and drugs and suicidal and going to counsellors because they're in fuck awful jobs and having to do it and having to pay the mortgage and blah 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 blah. So you can't necessarily equate with that person is a sex worker and therefore it's immoral to pay them because they're damaged from the way you're describing. Because there are people in the banking industry who are damaged, really.
Yes.
I mean, this guy that I knew, he was having a whale of a time because he was being flown off all over the world.
Yes.
So he'd be gone for 3-4 nights at a time. He'd be off to Arabia or
which is different from the street girl on
all the young girls were brought over and their passports are confiscated and they're forced to be sex workers.
It wasn't the sleazy down low market.
But you don't know when you go to a prostitute. You don't necessarily know that.
Well, it depends on where you get the number from. I mean, if you get it from a phone box, then you know it's going to be low end. If you get it from an escort agency, you know it's going to be high end. There's, ways and means.
But how do you know that girl who's serving you in some shop, is on minimum wage, is absolutely desperate? She's got a dying mother or something, and she's got to support her, and she hates the job. It's causing her great psychological trauma. You really don't know. But why are you assuming that a sex worker does have all that?
I'm not suggesting
when you're not making an assumption about anybody else.
I'm not suggesting that all sex because I would imagine that to be a sex worker is a difficult choice that you have to make. That the majority of them make a difficult choice to go to start to do that. And I would hate to, I'm not saying all sex workers, but I would hate to think that I was giving them money, but the condition of me giving them money was that they had to have sex with me. If I knew the difficulty of their life, I would find that very...
So are you saying then that if it was a donation of your own choosing, that you wouldn't have a problem with it?
What do you mean?
Well, rather than them saying, right, it's going to cost you 150 quid to have sex, if they was determined and said, well, you just put a donation in the pot at the end of the evening. You've done the same thing. There's still a financial transaction.
But I wouldn't have got myself in that situation anyway because of that.
So we're talking hypothetically. If you suddenly found yourself coming out of the TARDIS and there you were, and there was this, and you were in that situation, what would you do? So that's what we just hypothesising.
I wouldn't. I'm not making
any back in the TARDIS.
No, I'm not making any kind of moral judgments, but I wouldn't find myself in that situation.
And under your argument, you'd be happier to know a poor prostitute rather than a rich prostitute who you failed to give money to. So she's there toddling along at, say, I don't know, £200 a week, whereas if you used her, she'd be getting £400 a week, and she'd be a hell of a lot of a happier prostitute. Maybe could afford somewhere nice to live. So in fact, because of your moral values and the way you're enforcing it, you're condemning her to poverty.
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying that what society should be doing, they should be helping these people so they don't have to find themselves in these desperate situations.
What happens if they don't want help, though?
You're not taking away from it. You're simply depriving her of some
I agree.
of the means.
I agree. But that's not. You don't have to. You can still behave in a responsible way and give people things, can't you? I mean, we walk down the street and there are people on the street begging for money for whatever reason they want the money. So I'll go, okay, well, I'm not going to give them money. I'll give them food or I'll give them something to drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are other ways. I don't think just because we can't just go, well, they're in a terrible situation. That's the way it is. There are other ways of helping society. Surely, of helping people in need, as opposed to asking them to have sex with money.
A lot of our clothes that we have is made from, it's well known, it's made from sort of sweatshops, isn't it? Child sweatshops. So that's exactly the same, isn't it?
But surely one would try and, if you knew that some, like that Primark, for example, were making clothes being produced in sweatshops, then you don't go to Primark, do you? Yeah. You can make decisions.
You have the option and the choice.
Through knowledge, you don't have to go down that route.
But do you see that's the same thing?
I would.
Like clothes from a child's sweatshop.
Look, I'm not a saint, but you wouldn't go. Any of us would go into a shop knowing that children would be exploited to make the goods in that shop. You wouldn't, would you? Knowingly do that, would you? No.
Let me give you a more direct example. You're walking down the street. You see a guy you really fancy, and you go up to him and say, "I want to have sex with you. I think you're really, really fancy." And he said, "Oh, sorry, mate. I'm not really into you, but give me £100 and I'll do it."
Yeah.
Well, what would be? Well, I don't know whether you'd accept that or not. That's entirely for you to decide. But would there be anything morally wrong for you to accept that and do it?
If I knew that the money was just purely for his whatever.
It's really none of your business whether you know what he does with it, because he could lie to you or whatever. All you know is that you are giving him £100 and he could spend it on.
At the end of the day, it is a business transaction. You do not need to know his history, his past, or his future plans.
Do you think that would be morally wrong to take him up on that offer?
A range of questions. I need to think about that.
Right.